Hey everybody, welcome back to a plague-ridden episode of Permaslug. As you can probably hear in my voice, I'm not feeling all that well, but I have a lofty goal this month to post more frequently than I have been. And somebody asked me to work with the mega menu in Oxygen version 3.7, so I figured why not make a video on that. So I went out looking for a couple of mega menus that I liked and came across Evernote, which is pretty simple, but I think it will be a great demonstration for us to kind of modify the included composite element and kind of see what we can come up with. So on the Evernote website, they have a pretty standard looking header. This Why Evernote button is basically just a simple link. And then these other two here have that nice kind of mega menu effect. So we will recreate basically this whole header up here. And really the only air quotes challenging part of this is going to be creating the layouts for these two mega menus, which thanks to kind of the baseline that the composite element gives you is really not going to be that hard. Before we get started, I wanted to mention that the shortcodes for this particular tutorial are going to be provided for you if you're a Permaslug member. So if you want to skip this and basically just get right to editing what we have in the completed version, you can click the link in the description below and get the shortcodes for this particular reusable part and get started using this right away. So I already have an Oxygen install over here with some page content created, and right now where I am is my site-wide template, of course, because I want this to be the main header across my entire site. So what I'm going to do is start off by clicking the body so I get to the top of my structure panel over here, and let's go ahead and just throw in a div. We're going to use that as our header, and of course it puts it below my inner content, which is not what I wanted, so I'm going to stick it up there. Now I'm going to set this div's width to 100%, and then we'll change the tag here on this header to header. Inside of this div, I'm going to add in another one that's effectively going to be our container here so that we can set it to a max width and have it centered. So let's go take a look at how wide this content is here. We're going to be doing a lot of inspect here in the structure panel. So this header row, its width is set to a max width of 1220 pixels. So let's just go ahead and do that on this div here. We're going to set this to max width of 1220. And then I'm going to go margin left and right auto so it sticks us right there in the center. Now we'll worry about some more alignment later on as we kind of get some content in it, but for the moment I just basically want that to be our max width of 1220 and have it centered so we're on the right track here. I'll try to keep my structure panel expanded here so you can see what we're doing, and let's go ahead and just rename a few of these things. So I'm going to click on rename here and let's just call this one header wrapper, and then we'll call this one header row. And I'll try to keep up with naming this stuff so it can be pretty simple for you to see what element is what. So now inside of this header row, let's go ahead and toss in an image element. And then I'm just basically going to take the image link here, and then we're just going to paste that in our image URL. So that's perfect, makes it nice and easy. Now, of course, you wouldn't want to do this on a real site because you don't actually host that image. But for this example, that's the way that I'm going to roll with it. I typically like to make my image elements link back to the home page. So I'm just going to link that and go /home like that. So now our logo image is clickable and it will take us back to the home page. So moving back over here, we have the first link here, which says Why Evernote, and then we have these other two for the actual mega menu component. So I think what we'll do here is just start off with a text link element for this Why Evernote, which we may need to change possibly, but we'll just stick with that for now. So let's go ahead and just take a look at this. Mainly what I'm looking for here is where is that margin applied underneath the text, which pushes that green border when you hover down below it. So it's actually applied to the LI item here. There's 24 pixels of padding on the bottom of that link wrapper. So we can basically just achieve that ourselves. So let's switch over here to Oxygen, and I'm going to go back to my header row container here, and I'm going to add in a text link element. Let's go ahead and just add a class here. We'll just call this like PS header link or something like that. And then our text color here, we'll just set this to black because I think it's a full black color. And then our hover is the green, which I already have set as a global color here. Now on this, there was 24 pixels of padding on the bottom there, and then there was a hover border, so we're going to switch over here to the hover state, and then we're going to go to border, bottom. We'll set this to 2 pixel width for the moment. We're going to set this to solid, and then I'm pretty sure there was a transition effect on that, so let's take a look real quick here. So we'll just go ahead and set a transition effect to that element, and we'll just let it do its thing. Not really too concerned with making this absolutely perfect. So we'll switch back over here to the original state. We'll go to effects, transition. 0.3 is what they used in a couple other places for their transition duration, so I'm going to stick with that, and then we'll just go ease in out. And so now, if we hover over this, we should have that border, but in fact, we actually need to go set another border so we don't have that little jump. As you can see, it pushes that content down ever so slightly. So what we're going to do is here on the original state, go to border, bottom, we're going to go to width of 2, set that to solid, and we're just going to change the color here to white so it effectively blends in. So now when we hover, you can see that the border is there and we don't have that effect where it pushes the content down. So that's good. All right, so the other thing on this header row, so we can kind of get the alignment set up here, is we need to set this to horizontal. And then let's take a look at some of the spacing over here. So what do we have on the image element? Is there some margin on the right-hand side, or are they just using flex to push the content out? So actually what they're doing is they have the links in another container, which makes sense for us, and then there's margin left on that of 50 pixels, as you can see. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. I'm going to take this text link, and I'm going to wrap it with another div. This div I'm just going to rename like link container or something like that. And then we're going to stick 50 pixels of margin on the left-hand side to push our links away from our logo. And then over here, the first link was called Why Evernote. So let's go ahead and just pop that in, Why Evernote. And then those are all caps. So let's go to our class here. We're going to go to typography and change this to uppercase. And then the font weight was a bit bolder. So let's jump it up to 600 or 700. I think 700 is a bit too much. 700 looks okay. So we're just going to stick with that. So just a couple other things before we add the mega menu here. Let's go to the header row that we have, and we're going to set this height to 80, which is what it is in our example. And then we have the align items set to center. So we'll just set that to middle like that. And then as you can see, this is definitely slightly off, but what they do here is basically they take their link container div, and then they go to the height section. They set this to 100%. And then on this link container div, they set it to bottom alignment. So then the text is in line with the logo, and you still have that border effect pushing down to the bottom, which is pretty cool. All right, so next up on our text links here, let's go ahead and set that margin on the right-hand side to 24 pixels. And now we can go ahead and add in our first mega menu element. So what I'm going to do is click on this link container. We're going to go over here to add. We're going to go to WordPress and then mega menu. And this is, of course, the Oxygen composite element available in version 3.7. So I'm going to click on this. And immediately you can see it is off our page. So let's go ahead and fix that. So what I'm going to do here is go back to our header wrapper. I'm going to add in another just basic div. And then I'm going to expand the mega menu here. I'm going to go down to the mega menu wrapper, and I'm just going to get it inside of this div right here. So we're going to add a couple of these wrappers inside of this div later on. So this is just good for organization. We're going to go ahead and just stick that in there. And then I'll get rid of my text element there. Now, so these mega menus are visible on the back end, but of course on the front end, it's going to behave like we expect it to. So let's do a little bit of renaming here. So I'm going to change this div's name to just like menu container or something like that. And then one other thing is I'm going to take this code block here and I'm going to stick it up because we only need one of those. So we don't need to duplicate this every time. And later on when we duplicate these menu links here, we don't need that code block to duplicate itself multiple times, even though in Oxygen 3.7, it's not going to render that code multiple times. Still, there's no reason to have that multiple times. So another thing we can do is we don't actually need this wrapper right here. So I'm going to take this link and stick it up right there and then just get rid of this div. So our second link in this menu here says features. So let's just go ahead and change this. And then I'm also going to rename it in the structure panel. So we'll just call this features. And then I'm going to take this mega menu link and I'm going to add our class that we used to style that other one. So it was PS header link. So now we have essentially the same thing. There is a background color that's coming from the built-in class here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then we also probably have that in the hover state here. So let's go take a look. Background color. Yeah, we don't need that in the hover state either on that default class. So now what we're going to do is go back to our link container here. We're going to set this to horizontal alignment. And then let's just go again and set this to bottom like that. So there we go. Now we're kind of back to where we were. All right, so next up, there's one more thing. It looks like we have some padding on the left and right side of this text here. And I think that's coming from the default mega menu class here. So let's go back to that. And then I'm basically just going to delete all of this padding so that our padding is coming from the class we used earlier, PS header link, and not that default class there. So that looks much more in line with what we're actually trying to design here. So now what we're going to do is inside of this link wrapper that we're working with, you can see we're inside this mega menu link. I'm going to go ahead and add an icon element. So let's just add the class of like PS header icon. We're going to make this much smaller, so like 20 pixels. And then I'm going to see, I think we want chevron down is the one. Yep. And then on this link wrapper, we're going to set this to horizontally align and just middle is going to be good. And then that icon I think is even too big there. Let's go 15. And then let's set like 5 pixels of margin to the left-hand side to space it out just ever so slightly. And then let's see, does it inherit our green hover color? It does not. Wow, so that was a bit of a doozy. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why I couldn't get this green hover color to be inherited when I hover over this link wrapper on the icon, the text, and still show the border. And so basically what I ended up having to do is on these text and icons, I had to add a class. So if you look here on this text, I added the class PS-header-mm-link. And then on this icon over here, I did ps-header-icon. And the reason I added a class is because we're going to duplicate this. So if the IDs change, I didn't want the CSS that I had to add not to apply. So basically what I did was go back to the mega menu code block in this CSS. I just added a super simple line of CSS that I can share with you. And basically I just targeted the class for that mega menu that's there by default, and then just set it on hover to have that color. So nice and simple, but wasn't immediately apparent on how you do that, but now we do have that hover color. So that's one of those little things you might run into that can sometimes just hold you up. That took me longer than I care to admit to figure out. So anyway, we are now making progress. So what I want to do at this point is go ahead and duplicate this link here. So I'm basically just going to hit duplicate. And then the next one here was called plans. So we're going to call that plans. And then I'm just going to rename this. And then what I need to do now is duplicate this mega menu wrapper. So I'm just going to clone this. And of course it does show up twice in the back end, but on the front end, it's going to work perfectly fine. Now what we need to do is go into these elements and change their attributes so the link targets the correct menu wrapper. So basically what you do is right now I have the second mega menu wrapper selected. So I'm going to switch over here to the ID of the element, go to advanced attributes, and I'm going to change this ID to 2 here. And then I need to go to the corresponding mega menu link here and do the exact same thing. So this is my second link. I'm going to switch to the ID, go to attributes and change this to 2. So we're going to apply this. And just for the sake of example, let's just like delete this button and delete this heading. And let's save and go take a look on the front end. So now if we hover over this one, you can see there's the default one there. And then if we hover over that one, you can see it's loading up the second one because of course that button and the heading that we deleted are gone. So we are definitely making progress here. Pretty exciting. Now if we go back over here and take a look at Evernote, under the features, we have basically a 4 wide row of icons, heading, and a text element. So let's go ahead and set that up. And then plans is pretty similar, except it's 3 with some pricing information and a compare link. So this features one is going to be pretty straightforward. All right, so we need to change a lot about these mega menu setups. So basically, let's take a look at what we have so far. So right now, we have our mega menu wrapper with a columns element, and then this icon is what shows up on mobile devices to close it. So if we drop down a bit, let's go to less than 992, and there you can see that icon pops up. It has a class attached to it, as you can see right there, so you can actually make anything you want the close button. It just needs to have that class. I'm just going to leave that as is for the moment. So let's step back up to the all devices screen width. And just to make this nice and simple, what I'm going to do is inside this mega menu wrapper, I'm just going to add a new columns element. So we're going to go columns, 25 width, and we're just going to delete this other one. I don't want any of the stuff inside that. Inside of this first div here, I'm just going to add my own div, and I'm going to add a class to this. So let's call this like PS menu list item or something like that. I'm going to set this width to 100%. Inside of this div here, I'm going to pop in an image element. And then I already went ahead and uploaded all of these images, as you can see. So if we go back over here under the features, the first thing is sync and organize with a little piece of paper. So let's find that. There we go. And then over here on the right-hand side, what I'm going to do at this point is add in another div. I'm going to call this one PS menu text container or something like that. I'm probably not naming these classes like the most consistent thing ever, but it's going to work for us, which is fine. Now inside of this, I'm going to add in a heading. We don't need an H1. Let's drop it way down to like an H3. So let's switch back over here real quick and take a look at what it actually looks like. So this is pretty small. Let's figure out specifically what it is. So it's actually an H4. It says it's black and a font size of 14 pixels. So then on hover, what does it do? So it changes green. So everything gets that gray effect on hover, and then it's got some padding on there. So if I open this back up and we take a look here at that main wrapper div, how much padding does it actually have? So it's 16 everywhere. And then let's see what that hover color is. So it switches to a background color of F8 on hover. Okay, so let's go back over here. We're going to change this heading to a H4. Font size is 14. I feel like that's really small, but that's what it says it is. It has a margin bottom of 0.5 EM. So we're just going to basically do that here as well. The heading said sync and organize. And actually, I am not doing this on a class, so this is a perfect opportunity for us to use the copy styles function. So we're going to go PS menu list item heading, super long class name, but whatever, it doesn't actually make a difference. So I am going to copy that to this class and then delete the styles in that ID. That way, if we need to make a change to these headings in terms of their styling, we don't have to do it to every single one. We just do it on this specific one. So uppercase on that heading there. And then now let's add in our text link. Excuse me, not text link, just a regular text element. So the color here was just gray. Once again, the font size was 14, and it says, keep your notes handy. Here I am again, not doing this in a class, so let's go PS menu list item text, and I'm going to do the same thing, just copy the styles to the class, delete it from the heading, and there we go. So now if we need to make a change, once again, we don't have to worry about doing it multiple times. So what I'm going to do here is choose this list item div that we have. We're going to set this to horizontal, and then I believe it's probably middle aligned like that. So let's take a look. It sure is. And then what we need to do is set our padding. So we're going to go 16 pixels of padding all the way around. And everything is a bit scrunched here, but we'll fix that in just a little bit. Then on this, we're going to switch over to the hover, and then the background was F7, I believe. And then we're also going to switch back to the original state, X transition 0.3. Ease in out is the timing function they use. So now when we hover over this, anywhere in this div, which is a little clunky on the back end, but you can see it all does work. In fact, I think the background was F8 because you could see the background of that icon ever so slightly. So let's switch to our hover state, go to background, and then F8, we'll try that. And yeah, you can still see that icon ever so slightly. I think the only other thing for us to do here is to basically take this div that has our heading and our text and apply some left-hand side margin over here. So they've been using 24 pixels of margin, so we'll go ahead and stick with that. Before we do anything, let's save and take a look at what this looks like on the front end so far. So it's way off to the left-hand side, which we do probably want to fix here, because in the real-life site, when you hover over the features, first of all, you have a box shadow, so it lifts it up off the page, that whole container there, but also it's more centered, so we can pretty easily fix that. So we actually need to go all the way back up here to our menu container, and let's set this to a width of 100%, and then I'm just going to set this to center. And then now what I'm going to do is go to Mega Menu Wrapper here. We have this class assigned, so I'm going to go to Effects. Let's go to Box Shadow. And then let's go take a look at what their specific box shadow is here. So the box shadow is actually inset, which I don't typically use. That's kind of interesting. 0610 black at 10%. Okay, so we're going to go inset, black, 10%. And then it's 0610 0. And so now let's take this and we're going to duplicate this a couple of times and let's stick these containers in our columns so we can kind of see what we're looking at here. Here I am with Hydrogen Pack installed and I'm not using the copy and paste feature just because old habits die hard. So we'll save this, refresh on the front end and look at our features. So we're closer, but we need to set a background color because of course you don't see the heading and stuff bleeding through on the real site and everything is not completely full width like this. So let's go back over here real quick. How wide is this stuff? So it's the same width as the header, so 1220 pixels. So let's go back over here to the columns. We're going to set this to a max width of 1220, and then we're going to go back to our Mega Menu Wrapper. So we'll go to vertical and center, and then let's set the background color here just to white. And now I think if we save and take a look on the front end, we're going to be pretty much where we want. There we go. That is almost exactly it. So there's a little bit of box shadow that we're missing down here on the bottom, but we can fix that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and duplicate this row so we have our second set of 4. Switching back over here, all we need to do is basically just duplicate this column. And then I'm going to change these real quick to actually be what they are on the front end, you know, all these headings and icons, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got all these texts and icons updated, and you'll notice one thing that differs from our example here to the actual live site is these headings are often dropping to 2 lines. And one thing I noticed is that these divs here aren't exactly the same width as they are in the real example. So I'm going to try to go here real quick, making sure that I have my class selected. I'm going to set the min width to 290 pixels. And that does solve our problem. Hopefully we don't have overlap issues here because of course we are using the columns element here in Oxygen. We might have to go to every single div here and set the padding to 0, which I think we are going to have to do, which is pretty annoying. But unfortunately, that may just be a little nuance that we have to do. So I guess that's totally up to you. I don't think it's actually going to affect anything on the front end. So let's save real quick and just take a look. So yeah, it actually looks perfectly fine. I don't really notice any issues. So if you're someone that really cares about details like that, you could certainly go ahead and do that. But to me, this looks perfectly fine. So the only thing we're missing is the box shadow on the bottom part here. So let me take a look and see how we can get that. Okay, so in order to get that second level of box shadow, you will have to do it with a code block via CSS. So just as a simple fix, what I'm going to do is on this Mega Menu Wrapper, making sure you have the appropriate class selected, I'm just going to set a border bottom. So solid 1 pixel like that. Save this. Let's go take a look on the front end. And that looks perfectly fine to me. So I'm really happy with how this looks. This looks awesome. Now, the only thing now that differs between our example and the live site is there's some spacing beneath this, but all we need to do is just go to the second column here, and we could just add like 24 pixels of margin beneath that. And now we are pretty much good to go. That is our mega menu done for this features section. So our plans, of course, needs a lot of work, but what I'm going to do is basically just duplicate this whole section over here into the plan so we can save ourselves a lot of headache. So let's go back over here, and this mega menu wrapper is our second one. I'm essentially just going to go ahead and delete this. I'm just going to duplicate this one. Now this one, of course, we need to go back to the div, go to our attributes and change this to 2 so our link lines up. And plans is just a little bit different. So if we go back over here and take a look, we basically just have 3 sections with an extra text element in here for price and then just a simple link. So this one's actually going to be way easier for us to do. So what we'll do is expand this. We don't need the second column. In this, we don't need the third div here, which I don't think the columns element is going to be happy if we delete that div. So I'm actually just going to delete the one inside of it so we have that extra white space there. What I'm going to do in this particular example is just add another text element underneath this. I'm just going to add in that same class so we inherit those other styles. So PS menu list item text is what I had. And then I'm going to add in another stacked class here. So this one's going to be list item text. Let's just call this like 2 or something. The margin, we're going to just use margin top here. So 0.5 EM to keep things really consistent. And then the size and the color is a little bit different. So this is actually 16 pixels and then the color is 7.3 like that because it's just a little bit bigger than the actual text there for the price. So if we take a look, you can see what I'm talking about here. So $14.99 a user a month. I'm going to go ahead and get this stuff to match again, and then I'll be right back with you guys. Okay, so I just got everything up to date here in this second section. So what we need to do now is get ourselves to a point where we can add something underneath this column, which is of course going to be that link, which takes you to the compare plans page. So what I'm going to do is click on this menu wrapper here. We're just going to add in a text link element. Let's just add a class here because on a real site you would probably do that. So we're going to go like PS link green or something like that. So text color, we're going to set to the green. Our hover color is going to be the lighter green. The typography is uppercase. Font weight is bolder, so let's go like 700. And then we're just going to write out compare plans. Something like that. I think in their example, there's like a real arrow icon, but this is going to be perfectly fine. And then this would probably just go to like, I don't know, your pricing page or something like that. Now, the other thing is in order to get this to line up, what we have to do is effectively just wrap this with a div. We're going to set this div to a max width of 1200 pixels. Actually, I think it was 1220, and then we're going to set the width here to 100%. And then that puts our link roughly at the edge of this container over here. We have that extra spacing, like I mentioned earlier, coming in from that column. But as you can see, it technically is lined up on the left-hand side. So I don't know what it is, roughly like, let's say 25 pixels, something like that. That's about right. Good enough for me in this particular example. So now let's go ahead and save. And let's take a look on the front end. So we have our features and we have our plans, which is pretty cool. So we need to add some extra spacing underneath that compare plans to give it some breathing room, but this is looking super cool. So on this div that we already have selected, I'm just going to go 24 pixels of margin beneath that. So now let's just save this, refresh, take a look one more time. Super, super awesome. Really, really cool. And because all this stuff is just standard Oxygen divs and icons and stuff, you could customize it however you want. Now we do have a little bit more work to do back in our example here. So we have a help, a login, and a download button. Those are going to be pretty easy to do, but it might not be immediately apparent how you get this spacing between them. So let's go ahead and set that up. We go back over here to Oxygen. We have a lot of stuff going on over here in our structure panel. So let's just kind of revisit where we're at so far. I'm actually just going to rename this real quick. Mega menus container, I guess, something like that. Make it a little bit more apparent what's going on. So our header row, if we expand this, our link wrapper is just basically our image. We have our link container here. And then what we need is effectively one more div. We may even need 2, but I'm going to go ahead and just stick in another div in this header. Let's just use a text link here. And then in the actual website, there's no border on the bottom. So we're going to set up a new class here. These actually aren't uppercase. They're not that bold color. They're just a little bit less emphasized. So this will make sense for a new class. Let's call this PS header link DE, as in like de-emphasized. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but it does for me. So that text color was black. The hover color is our green. It wasn't uppercase, so we're not going to change that. The font weight I don't think was any different, so we're pretty much good to go there. The only thing really left to adjust is the hover color. which is already there, but we need a transition as well. So we're going to go to Effects, Transition, 0.3, Ease in, out. Okay, so there we go. So the links were help, and then let's add however much margin. I think it's typically been 24, so we're going to clone that. It was help, log in, and then a download button. So log in. And then I'm going to duplicate this text link one more time, and I'm actually going to add a stack class here so we can make a button that's not just a standard Oxygen button. So let's go DE button. So we have that stacked class here. We take a little look at this. This should be relatively simple, so we just need to change the typography and the border color. So the typography color is going to be our lighter green, it looks like. So our typography color is going to be our green here. I'm just going to add some margin to make it look roughly similar. So let's go like 16 pixels of padding, on the left and right sides, maybe even a bit more. Let's go like 24. And then we'll go like 6 and 6, something like that. Then let's set our borders to that same green. So we have the width of 1, solid. And then let's change it to hover. The hover green for the borders is going to be the lighter green we already have. And then same thing for the hover state for our typography. We're going to set that to the lighter green as well. And then back in original, I'm going to go to Effects, Transition, 0.3, Ease in, out, which I think is already going to be inherited. Actually, we probably don't need to add that to the button, but just in case. So now what we need to do is set this div here. We're going to go to horizontal. Let's go to middle align. And then the button wasn't log in, it was download. Now the other thing is on this particular class for our button, we don't need that margin on the right side, so I'm going to set the margin on the right to 0, and there we go. So now we're much closer. So we need to do one more thing. We effectively have this right-hand div over here, so let's call this one just like extra links, something like that. But we need to go ahead and wrap this logo and our other menu container in one div, and I'll show you why in just a second. So we're going to go wrap with div, stick those inside of it, set this to horizontal, and then go to middle align, I believe, and then we're going to set this width to 100% on the header row here. And then now we need to go to space between. So this is going to push our stuff to the far edges of our container here, kind of like it is in the example. So it looks like middle align is kind of working because we have this stuff over here middle align, but our elements right here are not working exactly as intended. So what we're going to do is set this container here to just horizontal align and then top. And then I don't actually know if this is a good idea, but what I'm going to do here is just set this to margin top auto to push it down. And then now everything is lined up as you can see. So that is our header essentially done. If we refresh here, we're going to see a lot of big changes. We do have some alignment issues ever so slightly here, which we can take a look at. But the point is that our mega menu does work. And as you can see, it is almost nearly closely identical to what we're looking at over here. So this is pretty sweet. Looks like a couple small deviations is this border is a little bit thicker. So that's probably 3 pixels instead of 2 like I did. And then it looks like everything else is pretty much identical. So we have that hover color on our links here. The button gets a little bit lighter. We probably need to bold that font a little bit to match. So let's make some final tweaks here. We're going to bold this button, fix this alignment, and then we'll call it done. So back over here, we're going to go to the typography. We're going to set the font weight to 700. I think we need to make the borders a bit thicker. So let's go back to our green here. We're going to set that to 2. And then we need to go adjust the hover one as well. So it's that lighter 2 like that. That's good. I'm going to call that one done. And then what is the problem with our alignment here? Okay, so the very last thing that I had to do to get everything lined up is just basically take this div here that contains these links and then my logo. I had to set the height to 100%. And then I just went in and set it to middle align, and now everything looks good. So if we save, take a look on the front end, you can see our mega menu is officially done. I'm calling this done. This has actually taken way longer than I thought it would, but this is a really awesome demonstration of the power of Oxygen. And thanks to that provided JavaScript code that they give you in that composite element, this allows you to build a menu that I think is pretty much inconceivable to build in any other builder, unless you were to use something like Max Mega Menu, but even then, I'm not sure that you could achieve something that looks like this. I mean, we nearly cloned this, which is pretty exciting. Obviously, there are some deviations, but overall, it's pretty stinking similar, if you ask me. So hopefully this tutorial has been helpful for you guys. If you're a Permaslug member, what you can do is click on the link in the description below and you can get the shortcodes for this template. That way you can go ahead and import it straight into your site. You don't have to rebuild it. But if you're feeling adventurous and you want to try to recreate this and get it working on your site, feel free to follow this tutorial and you can get everything from start to finish. So as always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in a future video.